project at Henderson High School that actually just kicked off today. We have a follow-up meeting starting next Tuesday. So if anyone here has kids at Henderson who might want to get involved with that, it's a whole lot of fun, and they did miss today's meeting, but it's not too late to still get involved. We do a lot of other great stuff with kids. We really are trying to promote within our community what the things are we do that help us thrive. So keep that in mind. Those are t-shirts we just tossed out at the football game. If any of this sounds interesting, we would love to have you join us for our next coalition meeting, which is November 14th. We are tweaking out our own public health campaign that will be geared toward adults in our community. And we have all sorts of people at the table, from leaders in healthcare, faith, education, business. And we'd really like to have parents and people who are representing various sectors of our society join us there. So please reach out if you have any questions. We're gonna hop to it tonight. Tonight's agenda is a little data heavy, but I won't promise I won't spend the whole night on data. We're going to talk about something called the Pennsylvania Youth Survey, which is a survey that Westchester Area School District sends out to the kids. Also some data from Penn State University that Mothers Against Drunk Driving has partnered with them on doing a study about that, and I'm going to talk to you about how that plays into what we need to know as parents. That's why we're here, that data. We're also going to talk about where we want to be in the world of primary prevention and why that's important. And then hopefully we have time to get to strategies for home and what we can do inside our homes to take small steps every day for better outcomes for our youth. So Communities That Care is a national model. Westchester is a local chapter of that. And we talk frequently in terms of risk and protective factors. So all of us have risk elements in our life, things. My parents were divorced when I was 6 years old. So that's a risk factor for me in my world. My parents needed to establish other protective factors since now I had some family turmoil. Did my protective factors outweigh my risk factors? That's really what we're going for. We won't be able to prevent all risk factors from entering our kids' lives, but we want to minimize them where we can, and we want to enhance our protective factors. That's a lot about what tonight is about, actually. So there's a whole host of things, this big long list. You don't need to read it all, but primarily we want to understand that they come in several domains. We have risk and protection, and this is not all of them, but just as individuals with the friends we choose. We also have them related to our family unit, where we go into school, what our school life, and for adults, that would be our work life. But also our community. Do we have attachment and belonging in each of these sectors? You'll find that attachment and belonging are words that come up over and over again in every sector. Opportunities for positive interactions. Is there opportunities for that? And are we recognized for that? Is really important. I've highlighted a few of the ones that have come up as kind of our bigger red flags in our local data. One of the great things about the CTC, or Communities That Care model, is that we get to focus just on Westchester. So whatever's happening in Coatesville is happening in Coatesville, and whatever's happening in Philadelphia is happening in Philadelphia, but we get to look at our kids and say, these are our biggest risks and the places we can make the most impact. So the data that we use to determine what our risk and protective factors are is called the Pennsylvania Youth Survey. It's given to about 3,000 kids every other year in 6th, 8th, and 10th grade. 6th, 8th, 10th, and 12th grades. And that data allows us to follow cohorts of kids and see what behavior looks like and how it's evolving over time. It's not, there's no names on the survey, and it's not anything. It's not school specific, it's district specific. And these are done across the state of Pennsylvania. So we can compare ourselves to the state, although while it's nice to kind of have that as a guide, again, the beauty of it is that we get to, regardless of where we fall in comparison to the state, we get to look at the data points that make the most sense for our community. Some of the data we get out of that involves youth mental health. Our numbers, as I mentioned, are in comparison to the state, we're actually about 10% below the state average when it comes to our teens' level of depression. And so it's easy to say, all right, well, we're 10% below the state, but we still have 27% of our teens who report that they feel sad or depressed most days. So that's a pretty high number. It's been actually coming down in recent years. Happy to report. Last year it was 30. The year before that, not last year, but 2 years ago it was 30. And the 2 years before that, because the survey goes every other year, was 32. So it's been nice to see that there's been a bit of a decline, still higher than what we were back in the early 2000s. So again, it's why this longitudinal data is great, because we can look at it over time, or we can take a snapshot. What do we do with that data? Our organization, a couple years ago, we looked at depressive symptoms among youth, that specific data point, and said, we don't really like the looks of that. What else do we see in the data that tells us something about our kids and maybe why we're getting those numbers? Now, there's a whole host of reasons why we could be getting those numbers, and we're not claiming that this is the one thing that will just make everything perfect. Public health doesn't really work that way, but public health does allow us to pick a data point and make sure that the people in our community also know that our kids were volunteering less, they were less connected to their communities, and instead of replacing those activities with maybe more school involvement or more faith-based involvement, the number of kids who reported, I'm not involved anywhere at all, that number went up, and all the other numbers went down. And so we looked at that and said, okay, well, this could be a space where we could move the needle on youth depressive symptoms. So again, I'm going to just do another little pitch. If this sounds like something that would be interesting to you, if you have any background in marketing, graphic design, or you're just passionate about our kids in our community, I really invite you to come to our coalition meetings where we build these campaigns and decide which data points to tackle. Our meeting is November 14th, second Thursdays of the month at 1 o'clock. So if I could multitask, I would put my email in the chat right now, but you can find us at this website. You can sign on, go to our meetings and events page, and you'll find our upcoming meetings there. So why is it that we do this, right? Primary prevention is the lingo in the field, and it is really what it means is that we don't wait until we get past the 90-degree mark here. We don't wait until we have kids who need treatment for mental health. We're not waiting until we have kids who need treatment for substance use, until there is violence in our schools and kids having fights all the time in the hallway. We want to lay the foundations that kids need to thrive. Again, not just parents, but their peers and their community. What are the factors that we can lift up and raise up and promote? So we want to spend as much time doing really great work in that promotion area and the orange, the prevention areas, before we have an issue. One of the data points from the PAYS data specifically, I always like to mention this just because people will, if you are dealing with a child who you're questioning the degree or level of some mental health symptoms or signs that you seem to be recognizing, this is a big area where I'm frequently say to people, when you notice that your child has stopped doing usual activities, that's a good sign that it's time to, really address that. It's a big sign for teenagers. Teenagers are fun and active and like to be around their friends. And if they're really starting to isolate, that's a red flag. It's interesting to note that we did have those numbers go up in 2021, the pandemic year. So that didn't really surprise anyone, but we did see them come back down, not back down to 2019, but much closer. And that indeed is very good news for us. The other thing I do like to point out with this is that intersectionality is a word we use. When we feel, I'm going to say, on the outs, right? If there's something about us, we don't look like most of the people around us look. We don't talk. Maybe we have a different language than most of the people around us. If our hobbies don't line up with what the norms are, all of these things, one of these things in particular is not an issue. We're a very resilient people. But if you have a family or a child where multiple areas of these things are at play in your child's life, then that's something else that you can look at and say, well, you're more at risk then, because community, as we'll talk about, and connection is super important for our mental health. And so it's really important to find those people where you do link up. It doesn't have to be 100 people. They always say one good friend who shares your interests. But important to point out. The other thing, which is not at all part of our data, but I always feel negligent if I don't mention it, is that social media has been proven to have a huge connection to depressive symptoms among youth in our lives. The fact that our numbers are improving, I want to give credit to all of you who are making strides at handling technology responsibly in your homes, waiting till your kids are older to give them phones, and having strong rules around technology when they do get them. If you haven't watched The Social Dilemma, this is an image from that documentary. It's called The Social Dilemma on Netflix. Please write that down. Go watch that. Watch that with your middle schoolers and high schoolers. I think it's a little over the head of an elementary schooler, but watch it first and then watch it again with your kids if you think it would be good for them. It certainly will be good for many. It does a really great job of explaining the dynamics and how social media was designed to play on our mental health. There's a reason the data is showing that big connection. And this is really great for kids because it's not just mom and dad always saying it. It's people who worked for Google and worked for Facebook who are in this documentary saying it. And talking about how they don't allow their kids anywhere near it. So it's really a great documentary. Again, The Social Dilemma. So back to our data from the Pennsylvania Youth Survey. I talked about some of the mental health numbers. I am going to address some of our substance use questions that get asked on that survey. There's a couple things you can look at from this data. This is from our most recent 2023 report. And you can see a couple things. One is the big jump between middle school and high school, right? So we're looking at, wow, there's something that happens between middle school and high school where our cultural mentality around it, there's a shift, right? The other very important thing to notice is that all of these numbers are low. They look high because we focus on the negative, right? We're drawn to this, but even the highest substance, which is alcohol, number one substance still used by youth today who are using addictive substances, is alcohol. That's the one we have to be paying the most attention to. But even seniors who are the biggest users, it's only 26% for the highest used substance, right? That means for seniors, for alcohol, I'm doing my math, 74% of that category is not using alcohol. This is asked, we use when the kids are asked if they've used in the last 30 days. And so that's they're also asked if they've ever used in their lifetime. And those numbers are a bit higher, but they're not indicative of regular use. So 30 days, if you've drank alcohol within the last 30 days, then that's more indicative of regular use. So here's what it actually looks like. If you span across all teenagers, 6th, 8th, 10th, and 12th graders, 11.6% of the youth said that they had used alcohol in the last 30 days. Only 4.6% of youth said that they had used marijuana in the last 30 days, and only 4.3% said they had vaped in the last 30 days. So that's super, super important. I don't know if anybody's writing those statistics down right now, but here's why it's important for parents to know that. Because FOMO is real, and it is real hard for kids who might think that those numbers are much higher. One of the biggest disservices we can do for our kids is to allow them to think that these numbers are higher than they are. Because if they think lots of people are drinking, smoking, trying marijuana, they're going to be more likely to want to try it. There are reasons that we think more people are doing it. Again, focus on the negative. Somebody, you have 90% of the kids did healthy, wholesome things over the weekend, and 10% of the kids did something not healthy or wholesome. Well, they're only talking about what the 10% of the kids did, or the 2%, right? It's small, small, small. So but that's what gets talked about. So it gets blown out of proportion. And then we have misinformation floating around out there, misperceptions. So hopefully you can do a little bit of work on that one in your households. Prescription drugs, I don't often talk about this a lot. Our numbers here are so, so low. Only 2% of teens reported that they used over-the-counter drugs to get high, right? They didn't use them for the purposes they were intended for. They used them to get high. And there's some good solutions we can implement in our house just as a matter of course for these things. There are lock boxes where you can put any pills that are being used currently in a lockbox. It's a really smart thing to do. It just lets your kids know that you take prescription drugs very, very seriously, that they're not something to be messed around with. And our kids, when they know what we value, that's in turn what they begin to value. Oh, I should have on this slide, but I don't. There's also medication drop boxes. They're at most of our police stations around our area. And so any prescriptions that you are done with and aren't using anymore, really recommend getting those out of your house, and it's easy, just drop them off. And there's a safe disposal place where it goes in and it's locked. And again, they're in police stations. So a little bit about marijuana. I don't know if you find all this as fascinating as I do, but you do not have to read the 115-page report. You can if you want to. That's on our website too, under our data page. But prior to the pandemic, marijuana use was rising. So that is something just to be aware of. The pandemic our numbers all dropped when we took a survey during the pandemic in 2021. Prior to that, for many reasons like legalization, our cultural norms are shifting around it. So kids' perception of how risky marijuana is started to drop. And it's not legal here yet. If it does ever become legal, these factors are going to make it harder for youth. The data from out west, where recreational marijuana was utilized first, is the easiest place to go and look at their data. And you will see when it's legalized, youth use goes up. So whether you're for it or you're against the legalization of marijuana, I am certainly against it. But there's no denying that correlation. So as parents, it's very important for us to understand that as it becomes legalized all around us, that's impacting our kids' mentality around the substance. So middle schoolers, amazingly, they actually associate less risk with using marijuana regularly than high schoolers did. They were showing sort of a decline in the amount of risk that they thought was associated with marijuana, but high schoolers' amount of risk went up. We like when kids think it's risky, because the riskier they understand it to be, the less likely they are to become regular users of it. Other interesting point, teens are not as concerned about driving after marijuana use as they are after alcohol use. We're doing, again, making strides in that department. It used to be they were 3 times more likely to say they'd be willing to drive after marijuana use or get in a car with someone after marijuana use. So again, kudos to all of you out there who are promoting this message that driving under the influence means any influence of any addictive substance. So I think that message is starting to get out there, and I'm glad. This kind of shows perception of risk. Again, this was pre-pandemic. I apologize. I didn't get a chance to also show you, to add my slides from our newest data, but this shows that how it was before, that marijuana use was much lower on the risk standings. They were like, marijuana is not as risky as these other things. Again, climbing for middle school, which is shocking to me, and declining or getting better risk numbers for high school, but not yet for middle school. So something to be aware of. All right, I feel like I had an extra slide in there, and I absolutely do. So I apologize. I have to go clean that up. On vaping, this is fascinating to me, and I have been following these numbers for a number of years now, and so I sort of leave them in there so people can see. Our vaping stats, as you see the ones that are crossed out, that was like our 2017 numbers, our 2019 numbers, our 2021 numbers, and now in 2023, 76% of kids who vape, remember now we're at 4%, that's 4% of our population, but I do understand that for the families that's affecting and the families that are concerned about that, this is important, it's important material. It is also important because part of that primary prevention means knowing the facts and knowing what's going on so that we can address things early. We can talk about the risks and how our perceptions are wrong, and most people aren't doing it. We need to be able to talk about that stuff with our kids knowledgeably. Talk smart is sort of my latest thing that we've been saying. But what happened was, the reason this is telling is that when kids started vaping, flavoring in vapes was a very big deal. And over time, when we first started, it was 80% of the kids said, no, I only vape flavoring. I don't vape anything else, just flavoring. 80%. It was a huge number. And slowly over time, that number has gone down and down and down, right? So more and more kids are choosing to have vapes that are nicotine, and fewer kids are choosing to vape. Again, this is of the very small number of kids who are vaping, but those kids are now, and what's happening is that's addiction. Because the lovely people who own these products will make more money if they can get our kids to use them, because kids' brains, being not yet fully developed, are far more likely to develop an addiction to any of this. To nicotine, certainly, super addictive, to alcohol, to marijuana. When we start using these substances before our brains are developed, they're just too easily trainable. They're so malleable when they're young. Only 23% of teens are are choosing flavoring compared to 75% when it was first included in the survey, right? Vaping hasn't been around all that long. So our nicotine numbers are going up, our flavoring numbers are going down. Also, our marijuana use numbers now are going up. And again, points back to what I said before about legalization and all of those cultural norm reasons. So now the kids who are vaping are also saying, well, I've been hearing marijuana is not so risky. And those numbers, you can see the steady incline of kids who are choosing to use that as a vehicle for addictive substances, not just a harmless toy that makes them seem cool. So lastly, on our substance use piece, and this is probably our most important. If you remember, alcohol is the most used substance by kids who use drugs or alcohol. But home is where kids are getting it. They're not getting served out in the community. They're not getting served at liquor stores, and they're not going to bars. They're not actually even getting it, at concerts or venues. And alcohol is prolific in our society. The fact that it's now in grocery stores means easier access. I would expect that would make access easier for kids to some degree. But by and large, that's not our biggest problem. Our biggest problem that with or without permission, the kids who do drink underage are getting it from home. And so there's room for improvement there. We can keep better tabs. We can lock it like we do prescription or over-the-counter drugs. We can be paying attention, and we can certainly have more conversations around it, which tonight is a lot about. So I mentioned another piece of another data from the Penn State University, which was done in conjunction with Mothers Against Drunk Drivers. And some of these slides that I'm going to share you are part of their Power of Parents presentation. But the big, great news, if everything I've already told you sounds a little on the depressing side, which our numbers are pretty good, so I hope it doesn't, is that 75% of our kids, when asked, report that their parents are their leading influence on their decisions about alcohol. I know, kind of mind-blowing. But what happens, and I think it's important for us to remember as parents, you might not influence their exact move every day as they're teenagers, but we're in this for the long game, right? And you want to impact their decisions over time. And I certainly can't say that my kids have if you put every decision they ever made, they're not going to all fall in line with what I'm thinking. As they are now in their mid-20s, I'm looking at them and going, they're pretty amazing people, right? So for missteps that I may have thought they made in their teenage years, they are coming back to land where my standards were, where our values were as a family. And so even if you feel like they're not listening, it's important to remember they are. They care more what you think than they care what their friends think. I know, crazy. So a few things you can do: make your standards super, super clear. Make your consequences for breaking the family rules super, super clear. Obviously follow through with those consequences, and have ongoing intentional conversations with your kids about substance use and mental health. I think that ongoing intentional conversations, we're going to talk a little bit more about how to do that, but it doesn't mean we have to have weekly lectures about this thing. Quite the opposite, because remember, we don't want to set our kids up to think that this is an overwhelming problem in our society. It isn't. This is a little bit about the communication piece that I mentioned. There are a couple of ways. I feel like I missed a slide again, so that's why I'm humming. I'm hoping it's still coming. So when we're communicating with our kids, it's been said 1,000 times in a million different ways: listening. We have to make that more of our priority than talking. Because one of the best things we can do to get our kids to keep coming back for more conversations with us is listening and really genuinely wanting to know their thoughts on topics. So if it's something like alcohol, understanding what they think about it is really, really valuable. And it will make them more willing to come back to you again when they're conflicted about something around that. We can make comments instead of speeches or lectures, right? When you see someone get drunk at a family holiday dinner or something, I don't know, or maybe it's on TV or in a movie. I've seen plenty of things. Read a book, or was it it was a book first and then a movie my kids absolutely loved. And the kids this was separate topic, but the kids were they were having sex and they were like 15. And then there was a TV show that we used to watch where the grandfather wanted the grandson to lighten up, and he tossed the scotch across the bar. Like, this is you could use this, kid, or something. And so both of those things are perfect opportunities to just say, that doesn't sound right. That something that seems like a really bad idea to me, and maybe that's all you say. Your kid is more likely to follow up later. Someone gave me a challenge once. It was to a group of people, but I took them up on it. Was to try that out. Pick a topic that you feel strongly about. Instead of telling your kid how it should be or how they should behave, just communicate your values very simply in little nuggets of information. Over a week's time, it took my daughter about a week, and we sat down for dinner, and she said, I've been thinking a lot about XYZ. And I was like, oh my word, it worked. It actually worked, because I didn't say to her, I really think we need to talk about alcohol. I don't remember the topic. I don't think it was drugs and alcohol. But it was fascinating to me how that strategy really worked. Then your kid is coming to you. They started the conversation, and that's just amazing. So yes, a lot of it has to do with asking questions. Again, I always think number 3 and number 5 should be next to each other here. You want to seek to raise your own awareness as well as theirs, right? You want, obviously, your child to be well informed and to make good decisions. But if you're raising your own awareness as well, then they feel more like a partner in this decision making rather than a power dynamics being set up. So, and when they have opinions, respect them. Validating somebody else's beliefs is super important and super empowering. You don't have to agree with your child if they say, well, I don't think there's anything wrong with teenagers drinking beer. You can say, well, I respectfully disagree. Tell me why you think that. So, you can validate that you hear them and ask questions to further where they got that opinion. So those are some of our tips for open communication with your kids around these topics. When we talk, this is super blurry. Sorry about that. This again came out of that research from Penn State University. Our kids start weighing the pros and cons around alcohol starting at age 8. And for people who question whether or not because that seems very early to most people, I tend to say that they're weighing the pros and cons of everything. They are starting to weigh what people tell them as being fact or not fact. So I always use Santa Claus as the example. Many, many people are telling their kids that Santa is real, and Santa comes down the chimney and has flying reindeer and it's going to bring them a whole bunch of presents on Christmas Day. And our kids believe that hook, line, and sinker until when? Until about third grade. So third grade, age 8, maybe it's 7 for your kid, maybe it was 9 for your kid, but around that age is when they start taking in outside influences and going, well, on the bus, I overheard Joey say, right? Or I saw that thing happen on TV where the grandfather gave the kid alcohol, right? And they start saying, well, is it? Is it that dangerous if there's a grandfather giving a kid alcohol? And that's exactly why it's important to call it out when you see it like that and mention that you believe that's a bad idea and why. Here's the slide I thought I had missed. Part of that research, again, it consistently proves that youth who are permitted to drink in the home, so this is why our home access is a problem. Youth who are permitted to drink inside our homes, even in small amounts, even it's, oh, it's, just a little bit at a cousin's wedding or whatever, they are more likely to drink more when you're not around, right? So if parents are saying, oh, well, a glass of wine here and there with dinner is no big deal, those are the kids who are going to have higher statistics around binge drinking than the parents who have very firm, nope, we don't drink underage. It's too, your brain development is too important. And I'm glad I know what I know about it so that I can maintain those rules. Those kids are also the kids who are being allowed to drink at home. Again, this is a very small percentage of our population, but when I was confronted with parents who were allowing it in their home, I had no good argument. I had not seen this slide. And so I want all of you to be able to have this at your disposal, to have something to strengthen your argument for why not. So they'll drink more. They will drink more often. So they're more likely to be the kids who said they've drank in the last 30 days. And they'll also, throughout their lifetime, will have more alcohol-related issues. They're just simply more likely to have alcohol, not necessarily addiction, but problems related to alcohol. So very important points to keep in mind. And no, we do have people who have a family history of dependence, drug dependence. They've been in therapy or treatment for that. They've gotten a diagnosis. Those kids who have a family history are 4 times as likely to also have an issue themselves. And I just think that's really good for kids to know. If you have a family history, I think that's really important to share. It helps them make better decisions for themselves. That's the red line going down that you'll see. The black line is families with no family history of substance use dependence on alcohol or other drugs. Oh, I guess this is just alcohol. I apologize. So the number is lower, of course, but it is still, you see the same trend, which is what this is showing, that if the kid starts drinking when they're 13, 14, 15, their likelihood of needing treatment for a dependence issue is much higher than if you look all the way over by 21. I actually can't see my own slide. If you look over to kids who have waited till they're 21, all those numbers are down around 10% or lower, even for kids who have a family history. So really important. That's early initiation, we call that. The earlier kids start, the greater the risk is there for them. That has everything to do with their developing brain, right? So on the left, we have a picture of a child's brain where the synapses are just firing like crazy. That's good, all that coloring. And the one on the left has hardly any brain activity. These are 2 15-year-old boys who were given the same test, like a memory test. And the 15-year-old, its brain is just not, now he was a heavy drinker, he's labeled as, so I don't know how that qualifies exactly, but you can see that it really does fully impact the human brain. The brain is not fully developed until the mid-20s. So my poor kids, when they turned 21, I was like, okay, so now I know that you're legal and you're probably going to go to some bars, but don't forget. And I used to just say, you have a baby brain. So it's as valuable. We can do better when we have good knowledge and good facts. And it's all about just sharing the knowledge so our kids can make their own great decisions. I also love this point because for kids, I got a lot of, you don't trust me, right? You want to go to a party after prom? What's exactly going to happen there? And they were like, oh, you don't trust me. Big thing. Kids love to use that one. Well, this really isn't about you specifically. It's about all teenagers. This data point is about every brain in every human body, right? We're more susceptible when we're young to issues with addictive substances. And this is the way I like to describe it to kids. We were all born with weak pathways in our brain that are just itching to become solidified on something, to grab onto something and say, I like that. It's why kids can learn foreign languages and physics and biology when they're in school, right? They can absorb so much information that as adults, we can still absorb new information, but not near at the same rate as young people can. And so they're going to form pathways. Young people are going to form pathways. Those pathways are going to be strengthened. It happens every minute of every day that they are awake, they are asleep, they are forming more pathways. And they're getting stronger and stronger. And so the more we fill them with resilience, the more resilient our kids will be. We fill them with resilience behaviors. And that is true for mental health as well as substance use. So I did a lot of talking about our facts because part of today is understanding that data that we have right here in Westchester. And I don't want to do that injustice just because the numbers are small. But mental health and substance use often go hand in hand. They can be, one can lead to the other. Mental health can lead to substance use, and substance use can lead to mental health issues. So it's really all wrapped up together. And we do still have, again, 27% of our kids who are reporting that they're sad or depressed most days. So every step you take to build resilience in your kids is going to help both those things. You get to get two birds with one stone. How do we do it? We model. We model, model, model. That is absolutely what we do. We let our kids see us engaging in behaviors that build resilience. And I'm going to talk about what they are. Your actions influence your kids. Just period. I don't know if you have a situation like this or you have a picture in your world like this where you can see your kid is like legit imitating you. I was hanging wallpaper when I had a toddler. And so I was squatted down, rubbing the wallpaper. And sure enough, 18 months old, maybe, she came over and she squatted down next to me and she just started pressing on the wall. She didn't have the little roller tool, nothing. And I thought, wow, just amazing. They want to be like us. 44% of our students know adults who have gotten drunk or high. So again, what we model makes a difference. We want to be careful of how we're using substances in front of our children. We don't have to be some ideal image of some perfect parent. Models come in all shapes and sizes. Parents come in all shapes and sizes. And I encourage you to embrace the ways and the means that work for you. Not everything what works in one household is not going to work well in another. So it's okay that it all look a little different. The fact that you're here tonight or listening to this online already tells me that you're trying, and I bet your kids are amazing. Our language matters. So I always say this is the little comedy portion of the evening. These are a bunch of cartoons that came around. Mommy wine culture, they called it, which was the just talking about it. Here's another one. Right? The kids are repeating. I think this one is funny. It's okay if we laugh. It's okay if we think of these as funny, but it is important that we understand that our language does get picked up by our kids. If we are teaching them by what we say that alcohol solves a problem, that is what they'll learn. Much better to say, I enjoy a glass of wine after dinner, period. Not, oh, it's such a rough day. I need a beer. Because it's a much different message that we're sending. They're super observant, and we inadvertently teach them things that we're not meaning to if we're not careful with our language. So back to primary prevention, like we talked about, just like going to a doctor and then saying, oh, your heart condition doesn't look so good. You look like you're heart disease. We really recommend you change your diet. That's prevention. It's not primary prevention. It means we waited until there was already an issue. Still really important. Still very important to exercise and change our behaviors once we know there's a problem, but also important to start before there is. For those of you on the call who have younger kids, we want to do that as well. We want to teach our kids to adjust when things are bumpy in life and recover from that. That will go a long way to setting them up for better situations with both mental health and substance use. I think of this as having 4 buckets. I'm going to go through these kind of quickly. Connection. This is one of the things we want to talk with our kids about. It's not just about family. Family is probably the number one as far as connection goes. We want to give our kids really solid family relationships. That's huge for a child. Not all kids have super solid family relations, but it also isn't only family. It's super important where our kids are connected to their friends and their communities. We need our kids to not have all their eggs in one basket here. It can't be all friends, can't be all family. It's rarely is it all community. But where are the places that they can find community? Is it a club, a sports team, volunteering, which is great for another one of our buckets as well. This is our wellness bucket, I think. Yes. Nutrition is usually the first thing people think of when we talk about wellness. We can go a long way. Again, remember, these are the foundational things. These are very early, that red slice that I showed you of that pie, where we're starting way before there's an issue. Good nutrition makes us feel better, makes us want to put our feet on the floor in the morning rather than sleep in. So the more we can do around good nutrition, the better. Of course, getting a really good night's sleep is another basic foundational thing. We did a whole parent webinar on sleep last year. So if you have a link to our website, again, you can go there. It's on our YouTube channel. Everyone who's on this call will get a link to that, and you can go to that same YouTube channel and find the whole presentation on sleep if you'd like. It was done by a pediatrician from CHOP, local here in Westchester. It was very well done. Fitness, of course, and I like to say, just move your body. It does not have to be a marathon. We just need to move. It gets blood flowing. It makes us feel better. When we feel at our worst, probably one of the best things we can do is go for a walk. Something nice and easy, but sun on our face, a little wind in our hair, and it really does a world of good. Lastly, on our wellness bucket is spiritual wellness, which isn't always thought of as readily as those first 3 things. But believe it or not, involvement in a faith practice is a protective factor. Having a spirituality, there's a lot of this has to do with practicing gratitude. Usually faith practices have some element of service to the community, which is key. Yeah, and community. Again, you're connecting with other people. One of the things I love about faith communities is the way different generations interact in those environments. So if a traditional faith practice isn't something that floats your boat, still you want to seek out those things that build resilience in us: gratitude, service, connection with other trusted adults outside the family. Probably going to repeat myself because that's a whole bucket, is connection. Creativity is a surprising one, but when we're able to express ourselves, that is really good for us. It helps us emotionally be able to handle and respond when things don't go well. I love this example of thank you notes because it covers gratitude and creativity all in one if we have our kids, make their own thank you notes. But encouraging our kids to be creative, and it can look almost like anything. I worked with a team of kids today who said, dressing and fashion, the clothes you choose to wear. And I was like, oh, that's sure, right? That could be creativity. Music, yarn arts, the list really is endless. I like to say create anything you're building from scratch. Oh, the other thing the kids said was brainstorming. And I was like, oh my gosh, yes. If you're in a work meeting and you're brainstorming on problem solving, that's creativity. You're coming up with new solutions to things. And it's really good for us. Challenge, huge. We want to seek out challenge. So we sort of live in a society where easy seems better, right? Where we said, oh, I worked hard, I'm going to put my feet up, but we want our kids to learn new things like playing chess or how to take really, really good pictures, not just snap quickly with your phone, but what makes a good picture. We want them to climb trees, even if they fall out of them. I'm not wishing that on anyone, but the exhilaration of that, of working hard to climb the tree, it just does something really good for us. It proves that we can, and we become super empowered by taking on challenges. Your bucket does not have to look like this. It does not have to be an enormous bucket. We have to just know that those are the pieces of the resilience puzzle, and we have to be conscious about keeping up with them. It's too easy in our society to say, let's just turn on the TV. Let's not go to the park tonight. Let's not, whatever. Let's not do that. So I heard about this service project we could have done as a family, but I'm too tired. My plate is too full. So be aware. Again, I'm not, the reason I have this slide is I'm not expecting, you shouldn't try. Remember, no perfect parent. You shouldn't try to do all of these 112%. Otherwise, your bucket starts to look like this, and that's no good either. And our hair gets gray. It's terrible. It takes a village to do these things, right? I love when I went to look for these pictures, so many of these pictures are connected to school or can be. School is an amazing place. Our kids are demonstrating, again, from that data, that less and less feel a commitment to school. They don't recognize the value of school quite as much as they used to. And so I personally love this particular slide and hope that this will help parents tell their kids why school is so valuable, right? Beyond the academics, it offers you one place where you can be challenged physically, mentally, right? You can be creative with the arts. So much great stuff goes on in our school. You have connections with kids your age, lots of other trusted adults. There's nutrition at school lunches, and it goes on and on. So our kids' commitment to school is a problem. It's a risk factor for us. So I encourage you to be supportive of school when you can, and pointing out to our kids why they're so valuable. These are our takeaways. I know I am nearing our time, and brain science, use that to your advantage. Definitely lean on the science. So it's not about trusting your kids or not. Remember that you have far more influence than our kids will let on. And so just have faith in that and keep fighting the good fight. Model the behavior and use use good language that promotes healthy choices. Use for yourself, build resilience. Use those 4 buckets for yourself, for your own lives with your kids. If your kids are saying, I don't want to, and making them go maybe is not in the game today, but you still do it, because modeling that has so much weight. Your kids will respond again. If they don't respond this day or this week, they're going to respond as they grow, right? Maybe they go through a patch where it seems like they're not listening to you and they're listening only to their friends. And I have been there. I have walked in those shoes. It is super frustrating, but they come back. They aren't in that space forever. And they need to have had that modeling done for them so that they know where they want to land when they're done, when their pathways are developed, right? Drop little bits of knowledge along the way. Don't feel like you have to lecture your kids about any of these things or why resilience is so important. Yeah. One thing I didn't talk about yet, but is here in my takeaways, which is interesting, is to establish a family contract. You can do that around phone use, substance use, driving. You could even build one just around, we're going to have a family contract for our mental health. I have some samples of those, which I can certainly send out to anybody who wants one. We haven't developed one around resilience, but I think that might not be a bad idea. And then don't worry about not being a perfect parent, and don't try to hide that from your kid. If you laid around all weekend, talk about, wow, I had a rough weekend. I don't think I did a single thing this weekend that would have helped my mental health. I don't think I did a single thing that builds resilience for me. We're all human. We're not all going to be some superstars. And when your kids see that you made a mistake, but you're not beating yourself up about it, it allows them to do the same thing. It really does, and really helps them want to get back and try harder the next weekend. So take care of yourself. You guys are amazing. You're parenting. Holy cow. All right. Take care, everybody.